In the world of punk marketing, there is something called captive consumerism. Captive consumerism is what happens these days when you have a customer and they are your customer for no reason. In other words, if somebody came up with another alternative, they'd switch. But nobody has, and until they do, they're with you. This is the worst way to hold on to customers. And as you know from being alive today, loyalty is at a pretty low premium these days. It's pretty low. People don't really get loyal, but then they say, I'll move. And Sprint is our case study for the ultimate in captive consumerism. And the reason why is because they've had probably the worst customer service record of any of the cell phone companies ever. And yet, all they ever do is advertise how they're revolutionizing customer service. What they've done, in a sense, is they've made people look at these ads that are running in every magazine. They're running right now, by the way. And they've said that they've got these programs that help you buy things, as opposed to programs that help you make your phone work. And what happens is, and it's interesting because they've had a lot of trouble with the government, local and federal level, where people are saying to them, you've got to get your act together, your customer service is really bad. We have this great, Mark and I have this great idea that we've actually, we've reserved a URL for them in case one day they wake up and decide to make it up to all of us. It's called I'mSorryIScrewedUp.com. And basically what we've actually written them a letter and said, because our paperback is coming out, we're doing all these like ideas for companies, and what we're saying is, if you ever decide to make it up to people and have a sign-up URL where people can say, this is when I got put on hold for an hour, this is when no one called me back, and in return you would get either money or credits, we have the perfect URL, I'mSorryIScrewedUp.com. Customers do not want to be contractually obligated. They want to think that you know how valuable they are. Growth in the world today is not about vertical growth. Most people in business spend most of their time looking for new customers. One of the reasons why the telephone companies have such trouble is because once they get you, it's almost like they don't care about you. The lesson, of course, is in good business is horizontal growth. The idea that you take care of your current customers in a way where, and this is a real punk marketing tenet, in a way where your current customers think to themselves, this is actual customer service in a way I've never seen it before. In America today, customer service is kind of an oxymoron. And they look at that and they think, wow, I'm going to tell everybody I know how great your product or your service is. That's people reaching for the sky with their remote controls. So in the old days, this was it. This was the tried and the trusted. And in the new days, it's about not confusing people. It's about making sure that whatever you're doing, and this is the thing that keeps cracking us up. Here's Chrysler, which is still in business, telling the world that they're going to refuel America. They're putting out ads on TV. They're doing newspaper articles about it. They're running circulars. And the thing is if you go to their site, this is the confusion that they're offering consumers. The reason why things don't work is because the average consumer wakes up, looks at something like this, and says, I don't get it. By the way, a side note to this is if any of you guys watch Dancing with the Stars, you should go on the ABC website and read the rules of how they choose, because there are just as many small print verbiages about that. So what you need to do is you need to figure out how, as a punk marketer, you're not to be tempted to try and move people in different directions. And, for instance, you have to think about what attracted the consumer to begin with. I've been having a lot of fun with this ad. This is the, can anybody pronounce this? Tiguan, which is the new Volkswagen with the unpronounceable name. This ad is running all over the country as a compact SUV. And in major cities, what they're trying to do is they're trying to show people that this is the one SUV you can park in a compact space. So it's going to be huge, it's small, and yet it's big, and yet it's not selling. It confuses people to the point of no return, because you look at this and you say, I want to be all things to all people. So after all this, how do you recognize it? How do you recognize this? In punk marketing, nothing looks the same. It's not going to be the ad that you saw before. It causes a stir. Something happens in you. Don't think dirty. And it makes you feel something. It makes you feel something. It makes you have conversations like the one I'm having with you about Outback, which believe me, I've never had a conversation with anybody about Outback. Any of you guys recognize this? A couple of years ago, the Burger King Corporation was having a lot of trouble selling chicken sandwiches to men. And they said, what are we going to do, because these guys will only eat hamburgers and we've got these chickens. Don't get me started on that. But they decided that they needed to sell the chicken sandwiches, and they went to a lot of agencies, and agencies came up with these big campaigns: men eat chicken, they don't eat quiche. It was really crazy. And one agency said to them, why don't we spend $15,000 and get a guy dressed in a chicken suit and put him in a room which looked like a set from a Valley porn site, and why don't we have him stand there and we'll film him in as many different positions as possible, and we'll call him the Subservient Chicken. And what they did was, subservientchicken.com, which is still up on the web, subservientchicken.com is a place that you can go to and ask the chicken to do anything you want. Nothing dirty. But you can ask the chicken to dance, you can ask the chicken to jump up and down, and they did it in flash technology. It was brilliant. And a lot of people heard about it, and let me just tell you something. That was a $15,000 risk for the Burger King Corporation, and that chicken did good. 15 million hits in 5 days. Average time on site, 5 minutes. Do you know what the average time on a website is? It's like 22 seconds for people that are slow, and 8 seconds for the rest of us. 7 million broadcast impressions. 450 million hits. Men flocking, into the stores to buy chicken. And the best part is lots of chicken imitators. Subservient Trump, Subservient Bush, Subservient Laemer. There were all kinds of imitators of people trying to do the same thing. And what it proves is, think about it. Everybody was talking about it. And of course, the naysayers were saying, well, big deal. So people are watching a chicken. Hardly. I mean, it's been 4 years. We're still talking about it. I still go there every now and then to see how he's doing. His feathers are a little ruffled. Recognize her? This lovely woman was on YouTube about 1.5 years ago on the day of her wedding, tearing out her hair, screaming a blue streak of words that I couldn't pronounce even if I wanted to, of curses and horrible things about how she couldn't stand the way her hair looked on her wedding day. And she was literally ripping it apart. It was an amazing sign to show, and the reason why people watched it so much is because it was like, wow, is this what it's like? People are obsessed with their hair. And what happened is, it ran on the news, uncredited. It was some woman who was having a meltdown. And what was interesting about it was it ran on the news without anybody's attachment to it, though you know nothing happens by accident anymore. And it was on all the local news stations. And what I found fascinating about it was that they actually, you could hear some of the bad language. It was not G-rated in the least. And they wanted to point out that women's obsession with hair, and it was a social message. A day later, the Sunsilk Corporation in Canada said that this was their ad. They were trying to show women that they didn't, and this was an actress, poor thing, and they wanted to show that women didn't have to be so obsessed with their hair. And they got so much attention. And this is a very conservative company. They wanted to take an opportunity to, as we say, go up against an enemy. And the enemy in this case was frustration with your hair products. They were trying to say you didn't need to have this happen to you. Enemies are good, but they don't have to necessarily be your other competing product or properties. It can just be some other thing that you're fighting against. We see this a lot. So you got to know who you are. And knowing who you are also means knowing that just because you're big or just because you're small, that this doesn't put you in any different category. People say, well, you know, we're going up against a Goliath. And I think to myself, well, you know, look what happens in Mexico. There are 2 companies that sell Coca-Cola-like properties in Mexico that are actually doing much better than Coke. And the reason why they're doing so is because they appeal to the community. They come out and they put things in recycled jars and they say, we're for you. One of the things about knowing who you are is also knowing what you bring to your actual users. Who are the people you're trying to reach? Some big companies right now are having a lot of trouble with that. You look at Starbucks. Starbucks is having a lot of trouble, not because their products aren't good, although they seem to say that sometimes, but they're having a lot of trouble because they forgot who they are. They forgot that they were the 3rd place. You were supposed to be able to go to Starbucks. It was supposed to be calm. You were supposed to buy a latte, and you were supposed to sit there and read the New York Times or the local paper, and you were supposed to veg. What happened the last couple of years is it became a sell-a-thon. You'd walk in there and there was a video, and they're selling books and dolls and hair products, and you know, it was like trying to relax in a Target, and it doesn't work. But you see, knowing who you are also means, for people who do PR for a living, also means making sure that you don't take an opportunity to talk to the investment community as if the consumers aren't paying attention. And Starbucks does that too, because if you think about it, when the money started slowing down for them, rather than talk about how they're going to go back to basics and be who they were, they talked about how they were going to improve, they talked to the investment community about how they were going to improve the coffee. And so, you read that in the business press, which we all read because we're humans, and we say to ourselves, well, wait a minute, that means for the last 20 years I've been drinking crappy coffee? So it doesn't actually work to not know who you're talking to as well. So while you're doing all that and putting out all these messages, you also have to give up control. You also have to let the consumer talk to you and do things. And the beautiful thing about the fact that 85% of us are using broadband now is that now you have this opportunity to go online and talk to your consumers, find out, like Janet said, you know, what you're not control over, what you don't have control over. And it's fascinating to me because I wonder sometimes, I say this to my clients all the time, I wonder sometimes if people are afraid to do that. If they're afraid to go online and talk to their customers because they're afraid they're going to hear things that are going to make them feel bad. But the truth is, you know, 2 or 3 years ago when everybody was still in the shallow end of the pool on AOL, it was very hard to reach people. Now everybody's out there. Everybody's available. Everybody's reachable. Give somebody something to talk to you, either online in a chat room or in some way, shape, or form, and find out. Find out. Don't try and slap people over the head by saying, you know, we're doing a contest, like I'm doing today, of course. We're giving out something for your time, et cetera, et cetera. Ask people for their knowledge. Get from them stuff that can help you. Giveaway control. You know, last year I spoke to Anheuser-Busch, at the Busch Gardens people. This was when they were American-owned. And they were having trouble because one of the kids that ran one of the roller coasters in one of their parks, Busch Gardens, he had been taking video of his roller coasters, and he'd been placing them on YouTube, and he'd gotten like hundreds of thousands of hits. And people were commenting how, wow, they'd never experienced it this way, and they were upset. They were upset because they didn't have control over the message. It wasn't perfect what he had filmed. There was graininess, and they said, you know, a woman stood up in the audience and said, what do I do? And I said, well, buy him some editing software. You have to allow people, I mean, they were so lucky. The fact that somebody loved their job that much that they were willing to talk about it on YouTube. I mean, I love my job, but I don't talk about it on YouTube. So think about what you can do to allow others to get involved in your story. It's a very important part of this.